fun. He's like, no, I actually help companies and businesses make more money, introduce efficiencies, and gather more customers and impress everyone. And the dude's like, what, how did you do that? And so he tells, and the dude's like,
when the doubt gets loud, but answer that call. Vision ain't real till you grind at speed, so breathing deep. Then call the damn leads. Call the damn leads.
Hey, welcome back to Call the Damn Leads, the show by sales professionals for sales professionals. I'm your host, Drewbie Wilson. With more than 2 decades in sales, I've seen it, been through it, heard about it. Now I'm bringing those stories to you, my favorite people in the world, the sales community. Because let's be honest, this is the greatest job on earth. It doesn't matter where you come from, what background, what personality type. You can create an amazing life in sales. And today's guest, no stranger to that journey. I'd like to welcome Damon Darnall to the show. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here.
Excited to have you, man. I want to jump right in, though. I want to hear your crazy sales story.
Well, I could probably give you a couple dozen of mine, but I want to share one of our members. We have a network of drone entrepreneurs, and these are people that really don't know much about sales, but by following a couple simple techniques, and one of them, is the traditional elevator pitch. So we do an example of getting on the elevator, and you're wearing your company name and logo, and you're sitting next to a guy, and it turns out he's like the CEO of operations for AT&T. And in this case, this was a builder. I'll use this exact analogy. But the idea is, if he looks over at your shirt and says, "Oh, you guys do drone work, or what is that?" And he's like, "Yeah, I can take aerial pictures from the sky, or I can do mapping stuff and all kinds of cool stuff. I got a 4K drone," and starts spouting off stats that the guy didn't care about. And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, I got my nephew one of those for Christmas. Yeah, it's pretty cool." So rewind it, right? And luckily, this new dronepreneur, we call them drone entrepreneurs, had this exact opportunity. He went to a cars and coffee deal, and this guy comes up, and he's like, "Oh man, you have a drone. What do you do with that? You just do it for fun?" He's like, "No, I actually help companies and businesses make more money, introduce efficiencies, and gather more customers and impress everyone they know." And the dude's like, what, how did you do that? And so he tells him about it, tells him he's part of the network. He was trained by the drone boss, and, these stats and stuff. And then all of a sudden the guy's like, "Man," he said, "that's fantastic. I'd love to take you out to dinner and see if you could help me with one of my projects I'm doing." And so the guy takes him out to dinner, and this kid is brand new. He looks 12 years old, but he's like in his early 20s, right? And he's just got a baby face. And the guy, he shows him some examples of the type of work he can do that we provided him. And the guy's like, "Man, this is great. I've got these, 14 high value lot homes. I'd love for you to do a video photo shoot for them. And I'll pay you $180,000. I'll give you 90 grand up front, and then 90 grand when you're done." And the kid was like, "Holy cow," and it tells his wife, and she says, "You're full of crap, right? That's just." And then the wire hit the bank the next day, and he was off to the races. So I think it's all about positioning, right, and thinking about hot buttons, what your clients care about, and how you can provide service and more value to them than what they're providing to you ultimately.
Oh my goodness, man! There's so many layers that we're gonna peel back from this wonderful story. First and foremost, I want to give you your flowers for the fact that most people jump into this and they tell a story about themselves. But you were willing to say, "Hey, no, I got to talk about this young man that was a part of my like." That to me says a lot about you as a person. So I just want to say that right off the rip. Secondly, I love when these young kids get to see what life can truly provide when they're willing to actually try the things that they're being coached on. Because this is something I've noticed over the years of being in personal development and going through programs and working with mentors. And because I know you're in this space, I'd love to get your perspective on it. But how many people have you tried to get to go through that process who just fought you incessantly about it, even though you have stories like this where it's like, "Hey, here's a young man that literally scored a almost multi-6-figure contract doing exactly this"?
Every single one. I'll tell you, literally, I'm not joking. I've trained over 10,000 dronepreneurs to start their own businesses, and every single one. Now, they don't stay stuck in that fight energy forever, but they're, it's like, running east looking for a sunset. They're exerting all this energy. It's a bad strategy. They're doing it their way instead of the correct way, or the way we're coaching them to do it. And it's funny, when we just did a survey for wrapping up 2025 with all of our dronepreneurs out there, and the number one complaint that they all had, or the regret, I should say, not complaint, was that I wish I had done more sooner and I had listened and followed the plan. That's the number one thing. But they come around, and we have people of all ages. We have a guy that's a retired colonel from the Army, and kind of on his third career. Like, military was one, retired from military, got into contracting, and then got really sick. Just physically sick, right? Like, overweight, diabetes, and all this stemmed from exposure to Agent Orange back in Vietnam and stuff. And, but he couldn't travel anymore. He couldn't do it. And so he tried retiring, and he said, man, that's for the birds. It lasted about 3 months. And he's like, I wasn't built to sit around and wait to die. So he found us, started his drone business, and, wanted to go into really advanced, we call it elephant hunting, where you're going after the big giant, the $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 sales. And we're like, do the low hanging fruit, get some cash in and consistency. And all of a sudden you're doing 10 deals a day at $300 or $400. Those are good days. Those are good weeks, and it's not sexy, but it's the life force to your business. And he fought it. And then he finally started doing it. And then he started making some good money. And then everything shifted when he got some confidence and purpose. He got some guidance from us internally on coaching and stuff. And dude lost like 100 pounds. His diabetes went away. He wasn't insulin dependent. And then he started getting, like, he just recently got a $300,000 contract with Michelin North America. And, and it's cool because now you see this guy in his mid to late 70s now. And he's like, I'm the happiest I've ever been. And ultimately it's from sales. It's knowing how to present yourself out there and giving the marketplace what they want, what they need.
Yeah, man, it's so cool when you see people step into that true, like, purpose and self and really embrace that confidence. So what drove you to building your program and kind of deciding this is the space that you want to be in? Because coaching and mentorship it's not always the most sexy thing in the world. It looks sexy on Instagram, right? Like, people see all the sexy stuff, but it takes a lot internally to be a leader. And so what drove you to this path? What was it that made you say, hey, I'm going to take on this responsibility?
Well, I mean, ultimately around the drone space, that was just something that I was always super passionate about. And it was, it was really just a hobby and a passion. And I got really well on the hobby side. I competed in national world competitions. I set a couple world records, but it didn't really make any money. And then about over 30 years ago, in 1993, I actually started a commercial drone business. And I think it's kind of like for anybody, if it's something you love, like if you love basketball, man, if I could get picked up by the NBA, or if you love football and I get picked up by the NFL. And so that was kind of the thing. Everybody that was in that space was like, man, if I could get paid to do what I love, that would be amazing. But it's still work, right? And there's a lot of work around it. And the problem we had in our industry, it was so technical, and it was really a self-limiting business, because it took about 5,000 to 7,000 flight hours before you were proficient enough to do anything commercially. And there was no money or revenue into it until you got to that point. But about 10 years ago, we had a big shift with technology, with cell phones and the microprocessors and microgyros. And now drones are easier to fly and harder to crash than ever before in history. And anybody
can do it. Affordable.
Yeah, and way more affordable. I mean, it's funny. We just bought a new drone. It was like $2,500, and it's better than an $80,000 drone that we built about 5 years ago in every way. It's just crazy. And so now, instead of spending 2 or 3 years teaching someone to fly, I can teach them to fly where they can make money in like literally 30 minutes. It's just the technology is so cool. So that was the big part, because I always wanted to help people, and I always wanted to help them get to their dream and around the stuff that I love, which was drones. And then it was just like this perfect storm of this disruptive technology of drones and the amazing growth that's there. And it's like, man, Unlike, because as you know, the type of business or the product you're selling is super important. Like, if you had a company, it's like, man, we really want to save our business. Can you help us? And can you get your top sales guys? And we want to revive our typewriter company. It's like, well, that industry's kind of past, man. Getting a typewriter and bringing that back is not going to happen. But something that's right in the infancy stage of growth, which is where we are, it makes it so much easier. Like, I even tell people, I was like, man, you can suck and still do good in this industry for now, right? Not in 3 years, it's not going to be the case, but right now you can, which is really cool. So that was really it. It was ultimately a passion, and then the combination of the technology and everything just kind of merging into where it is now, and then helping people trying to. When I built our network, Sky Network, it was around everything I wish I had when I started and ran a business. So it was just like every possible piece of resistance or roadblock or excuse or anything. I wanted to basically eliminate that and just hand it to people on a silver platter. Like we develop these things, we call them business plans, and they're not business plans in a traditional sense, but they're business plans for doing a particular vertical market. Like doing hotels and resorts for with drones. There's this, who you contact, who you talk to, what you actually shoot, scripts and presentations and all the marketing materials and swipe files and anything and everything that they would need, where even if they're not great at sales yet, because ultimately, and this, and I'm sure everyone listening knows this, that it ultimately comes down to your confidence, right? Amen. If you're confident in a product you're selling, or you're confident in yourself, I mean, and that's, you can, literally sell anything. And it's easy if it's massive value. We call them mafia offers. It's just an offer that they can't refuse. And then they see the results. But unfortunately, as I'm sure too, is most people, they don't get confidence until they get the reps in the gym and they start getting successes. And the more successes they have, the more confidence builds up, and then the more confidence builds up, and it's just like a big snowball effect. So we wanted to help them get to that confidence and those wins as quickly as possible, and building the systems around it to help them. And we found that it works really well. One thing I want to mention, which is kind of, you mentioned the psychology thing, and one thing I've seen that really was really interesting to me was people would grow their business and scale their business, and then they'd hit this little glass ceiling that was typically whatever their income was. If they made 60 grand a year, they would grow their business and they'd hit 60 grand and they would just level out. If they were 400 grand a year, they'd grow it up to 400 grand and then they'd level out. And it blew my mind. So that was the next stage of helping them get past that next psychological barrier. Because when you talk to people about coaching and mentorship and, mindset, everybody, oh, I'm good, I don't need that. Right. But we all do.
And I think the hardest part is, you and I both can recognize this, because even right now, if we were to sit and look and really do some introspection, we'd be like, we're doing good, but we can be better.
Oh yeah.
And there's that flip of the switch that at every new level, there's a new devil and there's some new challenge. And often it's us staring back in the mirror at ourselves. We're 99% of the time our own biggest enemy. The roadblock is you. Like, I love that you shared that, because it's so true. I've seen it. I've personally experienced it along the way. So like, I know how real that is. And I love it because it just goes to show all of you who are listening right now, who have a passion or a hobby that you're thinking, man, I'd really love to be able to make this my job. Like, how do I make money doing this thing? You can. It's possible. There may be some industries where it's a little more difficult. Like, right, if you're a typewriter guy, you might have to get really niche and find, antique typewriter enthusiasts or something. But it's not to say it's impossible. What I'm getting at, though, is that you can get to that same income level that you're at now with the skills that you have. Like, people will fumble their way to making enough money to provide for themselves. Like, that's just this weird internal thing. But if you want to truly grow and scale, you're going to have to get uncomfortable. And I love when you can, find people like Damon that are willing to coach you and also push you to finding that new level. And as you said earlier, right, when someone joins and you're like, hey, we're going to create this elevator pitch, they fight it. And I chuckle inside because I went to a BNI meeting one time and they're like, all right, we're going to do our elevator pitch. And even in that moment, with decades of sales experience, I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be cringe. Like, ugh. And I did it, and I remember cringing internally, and then I remember watching all these other people who had practiced it and polished it and being like, well, I'm kind of a jerk because I was judging them by this, but you know what? I recognize that I need to improve this skill set. And that's why,
kudos
again,
to you
having
for
people
that.
like yourself for challenging is so good. So when you're bringing people in, how do you get them to admit to themselves they've got to make that change?
Well, and you mentioned one of the things that we really harp on is the amount of success you're going to have in this industry or any industry or your life is how quickly you can get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm.
So what we usually have them do is go through and make a list of the things that they need to do, not that they want to do, but the things that they know they need to do, and then rank them from the scariest or the thing they're most apprehensive about. Because no one says they're scared, but they really are. They're terrified, right? And so they rank them, and then we have a challenge where that's the thing you do first. And not everybody does it, right? I would say probably 20 or 30% of them do it. But the cool thing is in this kind of group environment where everyone's sharing, when those 20% or 30% of people that actually do it, and then they come back and they're like, holy crap, I was so scared they were going to ask me all these questions I didn't know the answers to, and they didn't ask me any of them. It was so easy. I mean, I just did exactly what they, and then it's just this whole thing. And then everybody else hears that and they're like, and there are a few that make excuses. Well, yeah, but that's them in their city and their industry, but it's different where I am. That's the excuse everyone always has. It's different for me. But they see, and then more people do it, and then more people do it. And then eventually in time, sometimes they'll come back. And I always joke because I spend part of my time in Texas and wear cowboy boots. And I say, hey, we've got a pointy end on this boot for a reason. And so we'll kick them in the rear end and just say, look, the reason you're not having the success you want is because you're not doing the things you need to do, so suck it up and do it. You need 5 seconds of courage, just 5 seconds of courage. And if you can just get through that door, and then you get through and get, you might get a no or 2 or 20 or 30, but eventually you're going to get a yes. And we had one guy in the network who was so introverted and so terrified of really just any kind of, social interaction. And so his deal was he would just walk in, and he had a little postcard, a little flyer thing that we had generated for him or created for him, where it was offering, all these services at a massively discounted rate. And he said, and he'd bring it in with a bunch of donuts, with 2 dozen donuts. And he said, I wanted to give you this gift, and for the presentation, I'll bring donuts. And that was essentially it. His joke was, at first, he couldn't even get all that out. All he could say is, I'll bring donuts. And then he'd give the donuts, and he'd turn around and walk out. But then he got a deal. Someone had him go up there, and now he had to do a presentation in front of everyone, which he was terrified of, but he had to do it. And so he did it, and then he got all this business, and then now he's got some confidence. And so now he's one of our master coaches a few years later. It's pretty cool.
That's so cool. And it's funny how there's a reel that floats around, and I don't know the movie, so I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but there's this lady, she's interviewing this guy, and she's like, what's the biggest lie they ever told you? And he's like, it's not that simple. And she's like, well, what's not that simple about it? And he's like, no, that's the lie. It's not that simple. And when you're coaching and leading people and they come back and they're like, I don't know, I just did the thing that you told me to do. Everybody fights it because they're like, oh, it's not that easy. It's not that simple. It's like, or is it? Because once again, we often are our own biggest roadblock on the journey to creating that level of success. And I'd be curious, meeting thousands and thousands of young entrepreneurs and having the chance to, pour into them and see them grow. I love this show because sales is an industry where you might have people with multiple decades of experience, or we may get lucky enough where someone's just getting into an industry and they're like, I'm going to go online and learn sales. And somehow God has graced them to land on this episode today with all of this amazing knowledge. Damon, if you could give that person one piece of advice on how to be successful in sales, what would you tell them?
Well, I think that the number one thing is don't overthink it. I see so many people that just get in that whole, paralysis by analysis, and they go through and they think of all the what ifs. Most people way over prepare for a million questions that they're never going to get the answer to. And I think probably the second biggest thing, we already addressed one of them, is just the more quickly you can get comfortable with being uncomfortable, the better you're going to be. So the stuff that makes you scared, or the stuff that you're nervous about or you don't want to do that first, and you'll be amazed what's going to happen. But I think also ultimately, just be yourself. Be sincere and authentic. Don't try and be like somebody else. Don't try and be like Jay Abraham or Brian Tracy or Grant Cardone, or be you. Be authentic. And if you're passionate about whatever the product is that you're selling, then let that show through, and that is going to connect at a way deeper level. The thing most people misunderstand, and most people don't even know, that communication, the words that we say account for 7% of our communication. Tonality, breath, eye contact, energy, cadence, rhythm, all that stuff has a much bigger and much more profound effect. And everybody gets stuck on the words, which if you just back it up and look at it statistically, why would you spend all of your focus on 7% of the solution? It makes no sense. And people just lose it on there. So just being, authentic and passionate, that's going to get you, way, way farther. And go and take massive imperfect action. Just go out there and just do it. And you'll get a win. And one last thing. I know you said one thing, and
that's all right. I nobody can ever just give me one thing, so I just listen, because there's always so many good gems.
And I think the other thing too is just know that every interaction you have, whether you're in line at Starbucks sharing what you do, or you're actually on a sales call, you're planting a seed, and that seed will sprout and take growth. Now, some of them are going to grow really quick, like berries. And some of them are going to be like the Chinese bamboo trees, like the rhizome layer, which that particular Chinese bamboo, I love that analogy for business, because you plant it, you water it, fertilize it, give it sun and love and everything. And 6 months later, nothing happens. A year later, nothing happens. 2, 3, 4, 5 years, nothing happens. And then all of a sudden, 5 years later, a little sprout pops out of the ground, this little green leaf. And then all of a sudden, in the next 6 weeks, this massive 80 or 90 foot bamboo tree appears out of nowhere. And that rhizome layer reminds me of business, where you're putting in the work, you're putting in the effort, but you're not seeing the instant results that you want. But it's all working underground, building this rhizome layer and building your business. And we see it in real time in our industry, because guys in our network, they're like, oh yeah, I got kicked out of an office 2 years ago. Didn't really get kicked out. They just said, no, we're not interested. But in their mind, I got kicked out. and then all of a sudden they call back and they're like, hey, are you still doing that? I know I said I'll never use drone services, but now we want to incorporate it, and we need you to do 65 of our, our listings. And, now all of a sudden it's a, $50,000, $40,000 gig for them. And it was because of that seed they planted 2 years ago and totally forgot about it.
Man, I have absolutely loved this conversation, and we could probably nerd out on this topic for many, many more hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. How do we find you, follow you, check out more of your content? I'm sure we've just barely scratched the surface of all the amazing wisdom that you can share with us. So how do we come check it out?
Yeah, so you can, on social, you can find me at the Drone Boss, or you can go to thedroneboss.com. And in our live training events, where we train people how to start drone businesses, if that's something you're interested in or someone you can go check out Drone Command Live. And we've got a special discount code that we're going to provide for all of your viewers here. So they'll get a massive discount. The tickets are normally $499, and your listeners will get them for $97. So big discount there, because I think even if you're not interested in drones, I think you'll learn a lot. It's a 3-day total immersion, and we cover a lot of the psychology of sales. We cover marketing, different marketing that works in the real world, not college theory marketing, but the stuff that actually gets conversions. And then all about drones and the opportunities, just to see if it's a fit or not.
That is freaking awesome. Well, Damon, thank you so much for that. I'm excited to check out more about that. I'm going to be making a lot more events a priority this year, so you may even see me hanging out in the back of the room at some point.
Awesome.
Thank you again for taking the time today, man. Really means a lot, and had a lot of fun today.
Absolutely. Likewise. Thanks so much for having me.
Listen, you guys know what to do. If you enjoyed the show, share it on social media. Tag at Call the Damn Leads. Tag at The Drone Boss. Let the world know you heard some value out of today's episode. Maybe you know somebody that owns a drone business and they kind of suck at it, like they're really failing, but you want them to win. Send them this episode. You don't have to tell them they suck, but like send them this episode. It's like, hey man, I know you do drone stuff. I heard this episode. I think it's going to be great. Check it out. Because that's what this is all about, man. Sharing the stories and the movement that will help you develop your sales programs and process to be better so you can live the life that you want to live and do amazing, cool things, just like my man Damon. And maybe you have a crazy sales story. Maybe you want to be a part of the show. Head over to callthedamnleads.com/podcast. Send us your details. While you're there, grab a hat, grab a sweatshirt, keychain, some swag, spread the movement. 'Cause you know what to do now. Pick up the phone. Call the damn leads. We'll see you next time. Later, everybody.
When the doubt gets loud, but answer that call. Vision ain't real till you grind that speed, so breathing deep. Then call the damn leads. Call the damn leads.